On fields of prim and proper privilege, a people's game was bound in laws. A silver cup was cast for gentlemen. Stop me if you've heard this one before. Yes, the Calcutta Cup is a strange old thing, to frame how Northern rugby broke away, but it speaks of how those men in their suits fought to avoid the path that soccer laid, because that game had found itself a level field, a cup, prestige and growing fame. Now North knocked out South and poor beat rich, those rugby men refused to face that same shame. So when working men from northern towns called for change to cover their broken time, they got voted down and some even banned, the scourge of professionalism deemed their crime. So late in August of 1895, their sport now lost to them, all hopes forlorn. 22 clubs, Northern rebels one and all, free at last, because rugby league was born. It's amazing quite what can be attained when progress no longer is a misdeed. More ball in hand, hard runs, big hits, played by men of steel at full speed. And now of a Super League atop it all, at a theatre of dreams a grand final to see, so you can stick your Scotland-England Cup. This is Yorkshire v Lancashire. Now that is rugby. This is the Sporting Almanac Podcast.
Holiday preparations all set?
I mean, I've got a lot to do today, I'm not going to lie. That's why we're recording this nice and bright and early on Sunday morning.
Very early, but post semi-finals of the Rugby League.
Yeah, for one rare occasion where we can actually tell you who's in the grand final. We know who it is.
Yeah, we know who it is, and we are talking Rugby League from start to finish.
Yeah, as in from the start of Rugby League to the modern age, yeah.
Exactly. But before we do that, is there a tougher sport
than Rugby League?
Yeah.
I think it depends. There are probably roles within certain sports which are tougher, but Rugby League, 13 players are all doing the same job.
Yeah.
They're all taking hits. Yeah, there's small variations, blah, 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 blah. Everyone gets hit. Everyone has to hit hard. It's repetitive. It's non-stop. Whether you're defending or attacking, you're taking hits constantly.
That's it.
So no, I mean, there's very few, if there are. I mean, there probably are. I mean, like, you're talking ultra marathons and stuff like that. But let's take that to one side.
It's different, I think. What I mean by tough is not necessarily hard or difficult, because obviously every sport can make the case that it's difficult. I think you need to be a very tough individual all round to play this sport. You've got to have stamina because, like you said, it's ultra fast.
It's so hard. And
you've got to be an absolute unit. Well, unless you're someone like Rob Burrow.
Oh, what guy.
But you need, generally speaking, you need to be very big, very strong, very quick, but also have an absolute engine on you, because it is contact after contact after contact with like no breaks.
I think if you're looking at a sport where you make that much, physical hits, that many big hits within the space of 80 minutes in this case, without any pads on, of course.
Yeah.
And you're running into blokes who are at least as big as you are a lot of the time. I don't know.
And they come off I
can't think of a sport.
They come off major run-ups in this. Like run it straight, like fad that's going on at the moment and stuff.
Yeah.
That is just rugby league. Like if you're interested in run it straight, just watch rugby league.
Well, defence has to be 10 yards back, so you always have that much of a run-up at least.
And then your big guys are coming off 10 yards sometimes, so it's like it's like a 20-yard collision area.
Yeah, as much as we're pointing this out, and I know you said it's relentless, it is so relentless. There's no breaks in play.
Yeah.
Like rugby union, the reason I used to like playing rugby union is you do end up with these natural breaks in play. There's line-outs, the scrums. You get these breaks in play, so a big man like me, not blessed with a huge amount of aerobic fitness, would appreciate those sort of breaks. Rugby league, I've trained a bit in rugby league. I've done real smidgens of rugby league because I could not do it. Maybe when I was playing union, maybe when I was as fit as I possibly could do, I might have been able to play 20 minutes at a time. But it is so hard.
Yeah,
it's so relentless.
It's barbaric, and the rules on like tackling are much looser than they are in union. And so some of the shots are absolute filth. They're often pretty high and without without a discernible arm.
Yeah.
Just shoulders, basically, like, like a shot to like the high chest is not uncommon, and like they often forearm each other.
Yeah, there's like culture that comes across in different sports, like and different areas of the country, different teams, whatever sport you're playing. Some people in football, for example, appreciate a nice passing move. Some people appreciate a nice hard tackle. In rugby league, no matter what level you're watching, no matter what part of the country you're in, or Australia or New Zealand or England or France or wherever, everyone loves a big hit. You'll get a standing ovation if you put someone on their arse, and it's a good thing. But yeah, it's a miracle that some of these guys have 12, 15-year careers on the back of that. They must be beaten and broken by the end of it.
Yeah,
incredible.
For sure. I mean, like, you just Google like some of the best rugby league players, like Sam Burgess, for example.
Yeah.
And then just like look at the catalogue of injuries he's had.
There's a reason that the Rugby League Player of the Season, or the Super League, I should say, Player of the Season award is called the Man of Steel. So it's that for a reason.
Yeah, because you just take relentless hits. Yeah, I thought that was worth framing from the outset, because I really do think that rugby league is a very tough sport
I think so,
by any measure. Yeah, and you mentioned it already, like it is played internationally, although we are focusing on England's end of season finale. It's most famously played in Australia, really.
Yes, and they are the best at it. They are comfortably the best at it. In fact, as I previously mentioned, the highest level of the sport of rugby league that you will see is the State of Origin match. It's not England versus Australia. It's not Australia versus New Zealand. It is Australia versus Australia in Queensland versus New South Wales in the State of Origin match. That is the highest level of rugby league you will see, and it is beautiful. We'll preview it next year, because I really do like State of Origin. But yeah, and then Google some highlights there if you want to see the hits we're talking about, particularly.
That's the thing. I don't think there's ever been. That's another good question to pose from the outset. Actually, is there a bigger gulf between the number one country in the world and the new number two country in the world in any other sport in the way that exists in rugby league?
In terms of sports that actually play internationally, because obviously you could say American football,
sure,
probably,
yeah,
yes, but yeah, in terms of it, like not in baseball, America don't even win the World Cup and various other international competitions in that. Often there's not in. I'm trying to think, it would be America really, but no, I don't think there is. Like, Australia are just superbly good at it, and I think only New Zealand have ever come close to challenging them.
Yeah,
did win a World Cup once.
Yeah,
but,
that's it.
Yeah,
like it's a complete monopoly. Because that's what you were saying. America is a good example, but like rugby league is played. It's played by England, it's played by France, New Zealand, all the Pacific Islands, Tonga, Fiji, Samoa. It's played in France. I think it's the national sport of Papua New Guinea.
It is, yeah, genuinely.
And they're pretty good.
Quite good at it.
They're pretty good at it, exactly, yeah. Cook Islands as well, I think, is the national sport, and I think they go to World Cups too. So, like, yeah, I just thought, again, like, just as a pre-point to the substantive, I thought it was just interesting to frame that, because
Samoa got to the last World Cup final, actually lost against Australia, obviously.
They beat us in the semis, didn't they?
Beat us in the semis, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, looking closer to home though, this sort of probably feeds us in a little bit to the history and things, which you are our resident expert on, generally speaking.
I like this history. It's a good history this week.
But it is a popular sport in the UK, but it hasn't principally England. It's ranked as the 8th most popular spectator sport, but the 27th most popular participation sport in the country, according to Sport England, at least. Yeah,
I can see that.
Yeah, and its traditional popularity is sort of the M62 corridor, really.
Yeah, quite literally, which is Yorkshire and Lancashire, for those who don't know.
And that's where the game originated, so that makes sense.
Yeah,
and like it has increased in popularity everywhere, like in other places. Like again, like mainly France, where you've got Toulouse Olympique, who are in the championship, but Catalan Dragons are the only Super League team outside of England. So it's not, and there's only 12 teams in the Super League, so it's not super popular.
It's actually a very interesting history of rugby league in France. It's probably for another day, but it involves the Nazis, which obviously makes it very interesting.
More interesting, yeah.
Yeah. They weren't a fan.
Well, weird that they tend not to have been a fan of many things
because it's a working class sport.
Yeah.
And those in charge in France wanted this eliteness and the amateurism that goes along with that, pushing rugby union and football and other sports ahead of rugby league. Yeah. Anyway, it's interesting, but we won't go into that today.
No, but we will go into how we ended up with a 12-team Super League, starting from when exactly?
Well, you'd think I'd start this story at, I don't know where you think, 1895. That's one place I could start. 1823 is arguably another place I could start if you know your rugby history. I am actually going to start. I'm going to start first of all by giving a shout out to one of the best podcasts I've listened to recently, which is Rugby Reloaded by Tony Collins. They're like really short episodes, they're like 10 minutes long, which is a crazy theory. I don't know who the hell would ever listen to a 10-minute episode or something instead of a 2-hour-long episode, as the last one was.
Baseball.
But yeah, I've listened to like 24 of them in the past couple of days, so you can get through them. So I see the appeal. But yeah, he's he's a good historian. He goes into good depth, and he's a bit of an expert on all the codes of football, and that is the interesting thing about all this. First, okay, I will start off by saying the first and most important thing to know about the two codes of rugby is that the split that saw rugby league break away and go its own way happened in 1895. Obviously the simple explanation for that you can go through shortly is a group of teams from the north of England wanted to be able to pay their players at least some money, at least basically broken time payments, as they're called, expenses for missing work. And the RFU, who were formed in 1871 and controlled rugby at that time, and then continued to control rugby union forevermore, opposed that because they were strictly amateur, and there's a lot more that goes into that. So the history and background to all this is one of the most fascinating sports stories I think that exists. It goes deep into like how the codes of football develop, because there are a number of codes of football which we have covered already. For anyone who knows anything about rugby union or rugby football generally, probably will expect the first line of this to be, in 1823, a man named William Webb Ellis, with a fine disregard for the rules of football as played at his time, took the ball in his arms and ran with it, thus originating the distinctive feature of the rugby game, as the plaque says. The tale of Webb Ellis does play a big part in this story, but not until much later, because that was when it was written. It's not got a basis in fact. It is an origin myth. And it's an origin myth that serves a really sort of important part of this story, because originally, football, all codes of football, developed from a sort of singular concept of this medieval style of football where teams would gather together, they'd play in, whole towns would play, and it would just be a big shoving match until someone shoved the ball a certain amount of distance.
I'm sure hardly anyone died, I'm sure.
I think there were probably more deaths than goals, but nevertheless. Rugby originally, for the first 30 or 40 years of its existence, its origin story was that it was the natural development of that game. It was the closest form of football to the original medieval game of football. But the interesting thing is they then changed it to be the Webb Ellis backstory, and that was because when there started to be sort of splits in the game, not the actual split that occurred, when there started to be cracks emerging in the game, they wanted to protect the idea that rugby was a form of football developed through the public school system, through the posh private school system of England, and it was unique to that private school, not a mass participation sport. And so they basically conjured the William Webb Ellis story to give it that uniqueness that locked it to the private schools, rather than giving it a sort of origin story which came from being the people's game. Essentially, they were happy at that point for soccer, for association football, to be the people's game, and they were trying to protect their own arse as things started to develop, which I'll come to, and there started to be fractures in the game of rugby, because there were those who wanted to be recompensed for their playing and those who wanted to stop that happening for various reasons at all costs. So I think the William Webb Ellis story is really, really interesting, not because it has any basis in fact, but because of it is an origin myth which serves a purpose, as origin myths tend to do.
Yeah, just like a diversion of the truth.
It's
like
it's just something to rally around.
A marketing tool, basically. Essentially.
Yeah, pretty much. A marketing tool is a really good way of putting it.
Yeah.
So yeah, anyway, so in the world now, there are numerous popular codes of football which fall under 5 main banners, some with clear variations of some, different version played of others, obviously things like 5-a-side football, 7s rugby, footy 9s, which is AFL, Aussie rules shortened version. So there are association football, which I will refer to as soccer today for clarity. Apologies for everyone who was offended by that word, including you, Ben. Rugby football, gridiron football, Australian rules football, and Gaelic football are the 5 sort of main branches of football nowadays. Obviously, gridiron comes in a couple of forms, American and Canadian, and of course, rugby comes in 2 forms, rugby union and rugby league. As of this episode, we are just missing Canadian football from the list of the major forms of football, so stick a pin in that. Maybe once their new season comes along, we'll go into that.
We'll find a way.
We'll find a way. I presume they're playing now, actually. I presume it's a winter sport. I don't actually know that much about Canadian football, but it'd be interesting to learn about it. So there's obviously international rules football as well, which is like a hybrid version of Aussie and Gaelic rules, but those are the general types of football. So they all have a single common ancestor, as I said. They became more formal, with rules established around the turn of the 19th century in the English public schools, which, as I will point out every single time, are the posh private schools. We call them public schools. Please remember that, because I keep repeating myself. And its popularity that came on a wave of what would later be referred to as muscular Christianity, which is sort of this mix of patriotism, discipline, stiff upper-lipped masculinity.
See the volleyball episode, mate.
Oh, yeah, see volleyball episode.
YMCA stuff.
YMCA, yep, all the way back to that. Yeah, as we say, it just repeats itself. History repeats itself.
Yeah, it does.
It's common ancestry for everything.
Indeed.
So obviously that celebrated athleticism for its sake alone and not for any sort of monetary reward. So amateurism, essentially, was hardcore, the hardcore thing around that. Obviously, different versions of football emerged at different schools, this one being the version which emerged at rugby school, hence rugby football. And rugby football placed an increased emphasis on scrummaging and feats of collective strength, essentially. And it did allow the ball to be moved, to be carried in hand, but it was very much secondary to the big shoving match. So there's obviously similarities and building blocks to all the modern codes of football scattered around. Weird things that emerge in like early versions of rugby, which are still used in like Canadian football, like rouges, which is a way you can score in Canadian football worth a point. And obviously like behinds and stuff like that from Aussie rules and Gaelic football who have goals. No, sorry, not goals. Is it a point? Yeah, points.
Yeah, we kick it over there.
Yeah, so that sort of concept of a secondary way of scoring comes from that. But while there are similarities, any game of football from any code of football would look very different when observed by an observer today compared to modern forms of the game. But they all have a sort of collective history and they also built off each other. It's quite interesting. So rugby football itself, once old boys had left the schools and moved into adult life and gained some influence, they started setting up private clubs, playing the games that they once played at school. They started tweaking the rules locally, and eventually, once enough clubs were set up and there were enough variations in those rules, there was a desire for a singular organisation to govern the rules and to provide consistent quality opponents and such things. And the sports also spread thoroughly throughout the British Empire, allowing ex-pupils of some of the schools in question to form their own version of the sports, most notably Tom Wills, who was an Australian who went to rugby school and helped form Aussie Rules Football, as we mentioned in the Aussie Rules episode.
Yeah.
So, again, it all links together. The first rules of rugby football were written down in 1845, which makes it, as I mentioned in the Aussie Rules episode, arguably even older than Aussie Rules Football, although the RFU wasn't founded until 1871 and they were the holder of the rules, so you could argue that because the Victorian football rules were established first, you could argue that's older. It's debatable. It doesn't really matter. It's all old, and they all, as I say, have common ancestry and form off each other as well. So this doesn't really matter ultimately. But the best way to sort of frame what was the roller coaster ride that became rugby football over at the end of the 19th century was to describe what the game was like in 1870, which is just before the RFU was founded. It was one of, at that point, the 2 major codes of football being played in the United Kingdom at this point, obviously alongside soccer. The Football Association, which governs soccer, of course, had been formed in 1863, but they hadn't quite, in 1870, yet formed the FA Cup, which would be a very significant part of this story, which is kind of weird when we're talking about rugby, but there you are. The FA, yeah, it all links together. The FA being formed basically formalised the first true football schism, which is obviously between football and rugby. Obviously rules, or Victorian rules probably more accurately at this point, was also well established, but that was on the other side of the world, so we'll ignore that for now. But do listen to episode 25 because it goes into good detail on that. So rugby in 1870 was arguably the most popular of the two codes of football in England. Many clubs in what would later be soccer heartlands like the North East and Lancashire were being formed and were playing rugby regularly. Indeed, such clubs which were foundational to the sport of association football, such as Preston North End and Burnley, originally started off as rugby clubs and later became football clubs in around 1880, which I think is quite interesting. Rugby was itself also a very different game in 1870 to what is played now. It was 20 players a side generally, although it did vary a little bit, and most of them were forwards. So the game placed a huge focus on the scrum, and whenever a player was tackled, the game would stop, he'd place the ball on the floor, and a scrum would be formed. And you'd end up with about 14 players in each scrum.
That must have been a
slow
slow game.
Well, my next note on this is, it wasn't a very good spectator sport, but they didn't care. That wasn't important.
No, playing for fun, I guess, at that time.
Spectators weren't hugely considered at this point.
Recreational stuff.
But it's interesting, the idea that when you're tackled, you place the ball on the floor. Think about the amount of codes of football that have that as a core part of their concept now. American football, Canadian football, rugby league has that as a core part of it. The fact that when you're tackled, the ball goes on the floor and you restart in some manner afterwards. As I say, they all have these common ancestry, essentially. Yeah. So I think the first game of rugby was played in Canada in about 1876, and it was off the basis of that Canadian football sort of developed, and American football sort of developed as well from people who took the game of rugby over. So rugby is actually probably more the common ancestor for these sports than anything. Football, or soccer, I should say, tended to, well, because it was a bit earlier, went its own way and then sort of stuck with it. Gaelic football has obviously influence from soccer, but not many of the other forms of football do. So the first ever international football match of any code was a rugby football match played in 1871 between Scotland and England in Edinburgh, which Scotland won 1-0, because at this point a try basically allowed you a kick at goal. And I think Scotland scored a couple of tries, England scored one, but Scotland were the only one to score their goal, so it was 1-0, the final score. This was a good 18 months before the first Scotland versus England soccer match, but both were played in front of a similar sized crowds, about 4,000 people. So just to give you an idea, they were similarly popular sports, but there was more rugby clubs than there was association football clubs at this point. So the story of how, over the next couple of decades from this point, rugby lost out to football in terms of popularity is very foundational to why rugby league had to split away in 1895. And I think it's quite interesting as well. So if you'd indulge me, I will tell you that now.
When have I never?
Well, we wouldn't be here if you weren't prepared to indulge me. It starts with a tale of two cups. The first one being the FA Cup, and the second one being a trophy which will be very, very familiar to rugby union fans in this world. So in 1871, Charles W. Alcock, who was the secretary of the FA, proposed the introduction of a nationwide Challenge Cup competition in soccer, which obviously was the FA Cup. Quickly, this engaged fans who wanted to see their local team play exotic opponents from far, far away, like the North. And but it was at the time, because you'd play your local league, you'd play like the Surrey League or whatever it might have been at the time. It's like
horse and carriage, isn't it, to get anywhere? So,
well, trains, but yeah, even so.
Yeah, true. They just about come around, but I'm not sure that they were the kind of infrastructure that we're talking about these days.
It was within a generation of people being horse and carts. So for someone in 1871 who was 70 years old, they probably remember a day where trains wasn't existed. It was carriages to get around, and therefore, unless you had a bit of wealth about you, you just didn't. You probably didn't go 20 miles away from the place you were born. So yeah, it was a big deal being able to play teams from the other side of the country connected by this rail network. So the competition became hugely popular, inspired many local cup competitions also, and just cup football generally, cup soccer, became very popular at this point and drew really big crowds. The year of the first FA Cup final, 1872, also saw a rugby match played in India on Christmas Day under rugby football rules in the city of Calcutta. The Calcutta Rugby Club was soon founded afterwards by expats, ex-rugby school pupils and some soldiers as well. I think there was a Kent regiment based there. But by 1878, diminishing membership of the club saw it fold, and with its remaining funds totaling 270 rupees, the final members decided to melt the silver down, the coins down, in order to make a trophy. This they then presented to the Rugby Football Union with instruction to use it to create lasting good for the sport of rugby. This trophy, of course, is the Calcutta Cup, which any fans of the Six Nations and Rugby Union will know to this day is presented to the winners of England versus Scotland. I was
going to say England and Scotland in particular.
Yeah, it's probably in terms of, we talked about this obviously in the Rugby Championship episode as well, these trophies presented for individual matches. Calcutta Cup is the OG, it's the original, the longest, the best, some would say. Certainly Scottish rugby fans would probably say when they win it.
When they win it.
But the interesting thing, yeah, which they have quite a bit recently, not this year.
They have a very, very good recent history of winning it.
Yeah. So it's what the RFU chose to do with the trophy, which shows why soccer became the most popular of the two codes and why rugby league had to break away 20 years later. Because as I mentioned, at this time, cup competitions were all the rage. It was everything. Fans loved it. The media loved it. It was great for fan engagement. It was great for getting people into grounds, buying tickets. So when the cup was handed over and they were deciding what to do for it, almost everyone was saying, make your own cup competition. Make a Rugby Challenge Cup competition. Take on the FA Cup. But
are you leading us into the Challenge Cup here?
Well, I will mention the Challenge Cup at some point, but no. This is about 1880 at this point.
Okay.
And yeah, so obviously of course to try and replicate the popularity of the FA Cup, but the powers that be at the RFU refused to use it for this, instead awarding it to the winners of England Scotland, as I mentioned, which it remains in use to this day. The decision made and remains to make absolutely zero sense from a sports development point of view, from the point of wanting to develop and grow the sport of rugby, but it does get to the heart of how rugby differed from soccer and what held its growth back. It was that the men in charge didn't want it to grow. They had no interest in it growing. They didn't want this sport to get bigger because they'd seen what has happened to football as a result of that.
The boys are elite. They want to keep it elite.
Yeah, exactly. So the men in charge of the RFU, they were upper middle class gentlemen. They believed in those muscular Christianity principles we've mentioned on a few occasions now, including singing the YMCA too. It's a weird link, but it works.
It works very nicely.
They believed the sport wasn't for profit, but it was for personal development, pride, patriotism, other words beginning with P, I'm sure. They didn't want the sport to become popular because that would mean it would become popular with the unwashed masses, as soccer was quickly becoming thanks to the FA Cup.
The unwashed, Jesus.
Yeah, literally. I mean, yeah.
I know. But yes,
I know. I'm obviously pushing the point to its extremes, but yeah, that's essentially what it was. They didn't want a cup competition that drew a team of gentlemen away to some grim northern mining town playing working class men, and they really, really didn't want them to then lose that game.
Oh, can you imagine?
Can you imagine? It's deeply, and it was happening in the FA Cup.
Yeah. Pants were being pulled.
Yeah, by 1880, soccer was changing. Working class teams from Lancashire particularly were beginning to seriously challenge the established elite from London and the South for around other ex-public school strongholds. By 1883, as we mentioned in the FA Cup episode 7, the unthinkable happened. The Old Etonians, about as public school as a public school boy group can get.
Yeah, for those who don't know, that is Eton, where members of the royal family are routinely educated.
And several recent prime ministers as well. So they were beaten 2-1 in the cup final by Blackburn Olympic at the Kennington Oval, a working class team from Blackburn of all places. Again, about as working class town as you can imagine, taking on about as a public school group as you can possibly imagine.
At the Oval as well. Like, so many games we play at the Oval. It's almost worth doing an episode on the Oval.
Well, we could do.
It's a venue. But yes,
you could do it on anything. We're in charge. Why are you limiting yourself, Ben? Don't let society dictate what you can and can't do.
The podcast,
be your own man.
The podcast world is our oyster, as they say.
It is. So yeah, the more and more success working class teams had in soccer, the more and more the RFU resisted, and it really did resist the move away from amateurism and the ethos that governed it. It was long known that soccer players were being paid one way or another, either given good jobs to work alongside their playing, or paid expenses in quotation marks, to compensate them for working time lost, which was so-called broken time payments. Basically, broken time payments allowed a working man to take time away from work to play their sport without losing their wages. So the club or the league or whatever it might be would compensate them for their lost wages. So it wasn't that they were getting paid, they were just allowed to not go to work so they could play instead, which seems fairly reasonable.
Yeah, well, yes.
Especially when, obviously, as a working man, your wages are essential to your living and your family's living.
Especially back in that day.
Yeah, very much so. So rugby took its first steps to outlaw this in the 1870s, and it doubled down super hard in 1886, which is the year after the FA had finally given up the ghost and allowed limited professionalism in association football. The bar was clearly set by the 1886 amateurism rules in rugby, which stated rugby is and always would remain an amateur sport, which, to be fair, it did for a long time.
Yeah, very long time.
Rugby union, at least.
Yeah.
So the game of rugby was hugely popular in the north, mainly around Yorkshire, where it didn't yet quite compete so hard with football, association football, soccer. See, this is why I'm saying soccer, because it's a lot easier just to say soccer.
I'll allow it.
No, we hate it.
On this occasion.
You'll allow it. Concede on this occasion.
On this occasion only.
So some soccer matches,
some
rugby matches.
You can call it association football if you want to.
Yeah, but it's a mouthful.
But it's his official title.
I'm trying to not make the episode 2 hours long, Ben. So some rugby matches were still getting bigger crowds than teams in London got for soccer matches. As a result, rugby sort of veiled professionalism started to creep into rugby with so-called boot money, where players would find pound notes in their boots left by some anonymous benefactor after a hefty crowd had been drawn, as in the owner of the stadium. This encouraged better players to play, more time to be spent devoted to the sport of rugby, and therefore, as we've said in other sports, bigger crowds, better players mean bigger crowds mean more payment means players get paid more, albeit under the table in this case. So clubs in the north also took a more forward-thinking approach to forming leagues and guaranteeing good fixture lists, and prioritising sort of sport and competitiveness of sport over the social side of sport, and the socialisation and the class of opponent you were playing against, which was more of a priority in the south at this point, who were happy just to arrange friendlies against that nice bunch of Waddington school players. Let's make some schools up to not insult anyone.
Yeah.
Whoever it might be. You know what I mean? The old Etonians would play the old, give me another school.
Harrowians or something like that.
Harrowians, yeah. Harrow's a good one, because Harrow actually does play an important part in forming association football. But yeah, so obviously more competitive games in the north meant to a higher level of professionalism in all but the actual money side of things. Sort of more training, better tactics, better and more aggressive recruitment as well. And it also meant that more and more national team players for the England national rugby team at this point began coming from this crop of northern talent that was available. And therefore the strength and the prestige of the northern game really did begin to challenge the southern elite. So the RFU, seeing what compromises and concession had done to soccer, fought back hard. They banned players who'd taken payments. They kicked whole clubs out of the league as well. A lot of clubs who got booted out basically turned to soccer at this point and became soccer clubs as well, because they were allowed to pay their players playing soccer, which is, again, a crazy concept that you could just switch between those two games, which are so different nowadays. And they were so different then as well, but I guess if you're not allowed to play rugby anymore, what choice do you have?
It's also just probably a bit like, because it was disorganised sport by modern standards, not dissimilar to like playing sport at school where you play a different sport each term. So if you're a good sportsman, then you would play all of them, which is why you see that, examples of rugby players being England cricketers as well and things like that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, cricket, a lot of these rugby and soccer clubs originally were set up because cricketers wanted something to do during the winter, essentially. Wanted to keep fit over the winter, as we mentioned in the Aussie Rules episode. That was why Melbourne was set up originally. So it wasn't that these clubs and leagues in the north were screaming for professionalism. They were just looking for a different definition of what still defined amateurism. So they felt that players being recompensed for time lost working wasn't professionalism. It was just allowing amateurism for all, essentially, and not limiting amateurism to those who could afford to do it. So those who were paid enough the rest of the time, or had employers who were willing enough, or lived a life of leisure already, and therefore had the time to do these sports without, obviously, losing wages that could stop their family getting fed that week, which essentially was, unfortunately, the situation at the time.
Yeah.
So for those in the South, members of the elite, they disagreed, either for ideological amateurism reasons or for reasons of class and snobbery.
Snobbery.
Not wanting their game to... It's snobbery, yeah, essentially. Not wanting their game spoiled by their so-called lessers. So these payments being called for were the so-called broken tie payments I mentioned at the beginning. They basically came to be the straw that broke the camel's back. At the RFU's AGM in 1893, broken tie payments were proposed and thoroughly rejected. Arguments were also made at this point that there were more northern rugby clubs than there were southern rugby clubs, but the representation at the RFU, as you can imagine, was very much skewed the other way, largely governed by southerners. The sport was basically, in a nutshell, at its breaking point. And it all came to the head in the summer of 1895, where 22 of the leading northern clubs, I should say, met at the George Hotel in Huddersfield. And between them, they agreed to separate entirely from the RFU and form their own Northern Rugby Football Union. They remained amateur, but they just allowed broken tie payments. So that's all it came down to, ultimately. The RFU weren't prepared to give an inch. They'd seen what had happened to football. They'd seen how power had shifted in football as a result of this. Because this is actually really interesting to me, how soccer and rugby union have been governed since they took their separate paths from the 1880s. Obviously, soccer turning professionalism and the RFU doubling down and stopping professionalism in rugby. So soccer turning professionalism meant that commercial concerns came to the forefront rather than sporting concerns or any sort of moralistic concerns. So it basically meant that the FA ended up losing power, prestige and control to those better positioned to create popularity. So first of all, the Football League initially, and later to FIFA and to other governing bodies like UEFA and wherever else who were in a position where they could get better clubs together or better teams together in the form of the World Cup. And the Football League obviously could get the best teams in England playing each other, and therefore they cede a lot of control to them. Whereas the RFU, by maintaining amateurism and keeping amateurism as everything, they had the power to ban teams and players, and they used that power frequently. There was a point where anyone so much as coaching rugby league, because their school told them they had to coach rugby league, could find themselves getting banned from playing rugby forever if they were playing otherwise, or if they wanted to become a referee, or if they wanted to coach in rugby union, or if they wanted to be an official at a rugby union club. They couldn't because they'd engaged in rugby league, even at the most amateur of amateur levels. And that gave the RFU an incredible amount of power, which they maintained for 100 years, essentially. And as opposed to football, who the FA lost that power because they allowed professionalism and therefore money became everything in the game. So it's quite an interesting debate as to if it's a good thing or a bad thing. But the ultimate important thing for this episode was that there was a new Northern Rugby League and they were incredibly successful right from the beginning. They were runaway success. 22 clubs originally, they were at 60 clubs within a year. And they formed the Challenge Cup in 1896-97 season, which was the oldest cup competition in any form of rugby anywhere in the world. And the first winners of that were Batley, who beat St Helens in the final. That's a proper final, that. I like that. Yorkshire winning as well. I like that too. So originally there was a single top division covering both Yorkshire and Lancashire, but travel costs and expansion in this number of teams meant it basically became more practical to form county leagues at first. Over the years, there's sort of intermittently been county leagues, so Yorkshire and Lancashire leagues, or there's been a national competition. There was a national competition founded again in 1901, 1902. The word county leagues below that still was sort of fed up into it. The rules as well of rugby league originally, there was some small variations in the rules. It was 15 aside at first. I think it was about 10 years later, it became 13 aside, and that was all to create more space. So there was more space to run into, which is what popularised the sport, what made it more popular. Originally as well, they got rid of rocking and mauling for the ball pretty quickly, going back to the old rules. So if you think of like 1870 as being like the shared rules, the common ancestor of union and league, and then a lot of rule changes made in the next 25 years were basically rejected when league took it on, took on control of the game. So they basically said, "Now we don't like these changes that were made. Let's go back to the old version." So when you were tackled, you placed the ball on the floor, and a scrum was formed originally. until they realised that just meant there was about 100 scrums every game.
Yeah.
And I'm not exaggerating that number. There were some games where there were 100 scrums.
Now they have uncontested scrums on very few occasions.
It's all about the ball and open play now, and that's where the rules start going. Eventually, they introduced the play the ball rule, which is where when you tackle, you get up, you
roll the ball between your
heel
legs.
the ball back to a guy behind you, and you play on from there. The opponents have to, all but two of your opponents have to retreat 10 yards, so you've got a lot of space to work into. The 6 tackle rule, as it is now, wasn't introduced until the 1970s. It was a 4 tackle rule originally, and that was basically not having a tackle limit allowed teams to monopolise possession, especially sort of towards the end of games when they were trying to hold out for a win. They just pick the ball up, take the next tackle, go down easily, pick the ball up, take the next tackle, go down easily. And this led to, obviously, what could be interesting finishes to games getting quite boring. So they took their lead from American football in that, which obviously had the down system, introduced originally a 4 tackle rule, realised that didn't give the game enough sort of time to develop, so you couldn't develop through attacking phases as easily. So they went to 6 tackle rule, which has remained to today. And so, there's my quick introduction of the rules, is you have 6 tackles to make something happen, and if by the 5th tackle you haven't, you tend to kick it, be it a tactical kick to try and score a try and kick into the end zone and touch it down, or kick for territory, if not to stick your opponent as deep as possible, as you would in American football with a punt.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, the possession aspect of it is no different to union in that regard. Like, you kick to make your opponent play from further away from your try line, and that's exactly why you do it in rugby league if you're not in an offensive position of the field.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So there you are. There's the history of rugby league.
Yeah, well, it's
nice, tight, 40-minute history.
It is interesting though, like, for all the reasons that you said. Like, there's the way it didn't just emerge from one format. There was there was a code off almost between various forms of football. And a few have prevailed, and this being one of them. Yeah,
geography helped, obviously.
Yeah, of course.
Like almost every form of football, other than association football, basically has emerged somewhat geographically.
Yeah, Gaelic football,
although
American football.
Although it has then spread to the world.
Yeah,
there's good stories as well about how it spread to Australia, basically touring Australian teams that came over to play rugby union, making a lot of money from this tours, realised that they weren't getting any of the money from the tours, and found out that there's another form of rugby being played in England where you could get and keep the money, and all of a sudden there was a big desire to maybe try that version of the game out. And obviously the rest is history in Australian terms, because they became rather good at rugby league.
I saw a really funny thing the other day where I think the Australian schoolboys walloped the Kiwi, the All Blacks, or New Zealand schoolboys at rugby union, and there was a New Zealand commentator, an analyst, whatever you want to call it, on the internet, basically saying, "I'm not worried about this. All this means is that Australia's ARL team is nailed on for years to come." And he was like, because everyone's just going to end up playing ARL. Which made me laugh.
Where the money is.
Yeah, because it's and it's still that divide. The divide is even more palpable, arguably, in Australia than it is over here in terms of union struggling versus league. Where it's the opposite way around over here.
To a certain extent, I mean, union's still struggling a bit.
Well,
to be fair,
it's on a bit of a comeback, I would say. The domestic union game. It nearly fell apart in recent years with 3 clubs going bust, but they seem.
I'd say there's obviously we'll get into talking about the Super League soon. I think the Super League is comparable, popularity-wise. Club rugby is comparable between the two. It's just international rugby.
Yes, international rugby
union is way more popular.
Yeah,
the International Rugby League in this country, the Six Nations particularly.
Yes,
happening every year. Such an intense competition. Intense rivalries between 4 nations that occupy the same pair of islands, plus France, plus Italy. Yeah, obviously helps.
Definitely helps. I agree with that completely. I mean, the international game is enormous in the union over here. Couple of other things on the rules.
Go for it.
Just in case. 4 points for a try, not 5.
Yeah.
1 point for a drop goal, not 3.
Yeah.
2 points for a penalty, not 3.
Yeah.
Conversions are the same. 2 points.
They are 2 points. And this is all developed over time. It was 3 points for a try originally. Yeah. Obviously, as I said, if you go way back, it was just
1
a point for the kick.
Yeah. Get to the end to get the opportunity to kick, yeah.
Yeah, or you could kick a drop goal and that'd be worth 1 point. You could kick a goal from the field, essentially, or presumably a penalty. But, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just important drawing out those distinctions because if anybody does decide to tune into the grand finals, never watched rugby league before, you will see that the scoring system is different, and that might be confusing if you're familiar with Union. No line outs starts with an uncontested scrum.
Yeah,
if the ball goes
off
they
don't.
The pitch.
One of the first things they got rid of were line outs because I quite like line outs of rugby union now, but lifting at line-outs has only been a thing for the past, since the 90s, I think.
Yeah, it used to just be throw and jump, didn't it?
Yeah, I think the 91 World Cup. So they were ugly things, basically a mad scramble, and a lot of them would just end up being a scrum anyway, if one team or the other were to knock the ball on. So the thinking back in the day was just get rid of them. And again, quite like it. Like rugby league tries to minimise scrummaging as much as possible. Seems more and more rule changes are just getting rid of scrums, which is a good thing. You just want the ball in play.
Yeah, the whole thing.
I get that.
All of the rules in rugby league are designed to make it a more entertaining game and therefore appealing to spectators. And that is obvious from the history that you set out. That was its purpose, really, to bring in paying customers so that people could be
success,
paid.
yeah.
Yeah, so...
They wanted the game to be as interesting as possible, not as pure as possible. And in the modern age of rugby union, a lot of the rules changes they're making, they're taking directly from rugby league, such as the 40-20 kick in rugby league becoming the... What is it, 40-22 or whatever it is? 50-22.
50-22,
yeah.
That's where you kick the ball from inside your own playing half. It bounces in the opposition's... a certain area of the opposition's half, and if it goes
close to their goal,
if it goes off the pitch, then you get the ball back, where ordinarily if you kick the ball off the pitch you lose possession.
So that encourages your wingers, as in defensive wingers, have to sit deeper so you don't get caught out by that, which creates more space to attack into. So it's not just an advantageous thing, a single move you can use, it's also opens the game up as well. It's a good rule.
It is a good rule, and it makes sense because the pitch is the same size for all intents and purposes, and you've got to go the entire distance, which is somewhere between 80 and probably about 80 meters. And if you divide that up by 6 tackles, you got to go like 12 meters of tackle. So you need to create the space, otherwise the ball would be constantly changing hands in the middle of the pitch. Yeah,
it creates overloads essentially, because you have 13 players in possession of the ball versus theoretically maybe 11 players defending, because some of them have to sit deep.
Yeah, in case you
until you get obviously closer into your own half. So opens up space.
It's good.
Smart.
It's a smart move, smart idea. So the Super League, where like the thing that we need to talk about in order to preview this weekend's events. I can tell you where it came from. I can do it quicker than you can.
Go for it.
Rupert Murdoch.
There you go.
Do you like that?
As all
the yin and yang to sporting history podcasts is I just give you a name and you give us 150 years of history. I prefer your approach because it comes from a more informed position than mine.
There's a balance that needs to be found. But I think you've summed it up quite nicely, to be fair.
Yes, well, he is Australian, isn't he? Rupert Murdoch, is that right? I think
he is.
I think he is, yeah. And he obviously is the owner of Sky. He owned the Premier League rights in the early 90s, as we've discussed on one of our football episodes.
19.
Sky were going bust. They saw a niche for sports. They started buying up sports. One of the sports they already had was ARL, which was obviously very popular. They saw an opportunity to get into rugby league because in the 80s, well, not even the 80s, in the 70s, and actually not even the 70s, probably in the 60s was like the height of rugby league's like heyday, and then it started to deteriorate in popularity somewhat, although it did have a sort of a boom in popularity in the 80s when there was a couple of quite spectacular Challenge Cup finals. I think Wigan Warriors, Martin of Fire, that kind of stuff. And so they sort of had like a renaissance of sorts, but continued to dwindle domestically. And then Murdoch saw an opportunity to basically buy it, create a Super League, and actual Super League this time, like its name is the Super League. But the point being that it was to create an elite league that was aspirational for all of the clubs, that was funded by TV revenue rather than fan attendance at grounds.
It didn't help in rugby league in the 80s and early 90s that there was only one team winning everything as well.
Yeah.
Just Wigan winning everything. So I think that didn't help. But anyway, sorry, interrupted you.
No, I mean, that's pretty much it, really. He just goes and buys it, form the Super League, and it's, it's remained not quite exactly the same ever since, but it is essentially the top end of the English rugby system or British rugby league system. 12 teams now, 11 from Northern England, as we've already discussed in great detail, and one from France. Replace the first division, switch from winter to summer. That's probably one of the big things. Yeah, a huge difference. It's not competing directly with Club Rugby Union as well. That's now it's a summer sports. That's the point. Yeah, and then that's why its grand final is in October, because the entire domestic season is played over the summer. Began in '96.
It's also an interesting point to point out. We said it was relentless. We said it was non-stop. You don't get any breaks. It's also been played in the height of summer, a lot of it, through July and August, where I know England gets a bad reputation for its weather, but it can get very hot during the summer here, very humid as well. So just to add that to the, these people being Ironmen aspect of it.
I mean, only 24 clubs have competed in it since its inception, since 1996. So you could argue whether or not that equates to a success. 19 have been from England, 3 from France, 1 from Wales and 1 from Canada, but 12 of them have effectively fallen out or gone bust, including some major names.
There's not really any way in, well, other than patience and waiting your turn, but there is a very easy way out, which has happened to a lot of teams, and that's
going bankrupt.
As you say, going bankrupt.
Yeah, the famously is sort of Bradford Bulls, London Broncos, and one of the founding teams from France, PSG, Paris Saint-Germain. I don't think many people would know that Paris Saint-Germain had a rugby league team, but there you are.
I'd forgotten they had.
Paris Saint-Germain are a bit like what we were saying about Fenerbahce. They're like an institution that has a series of teams, but are most famed for their football team. Basketball is another area, I think, that both of those clubs excel in. Yeah, there used to be relegation. You know a bit more about this than I do, but there used to be relegation where it would be they called it the £1 million game, because that's how much it would effectively earn your club if you stayed in the Super League or got promoted to it. And it was a playoff between, was it the winners of the Championship and the losers, the bottom team in the Super League?
Yes, effectively. So it was one up, one down system.
Yeah,
set up in that way, so one team would have a chance to save themselves, the other to find glory briefly while it lasted.
That's been scrapped now, and basically to get into the Super League, this is so unsporting. Like, after all the the long history and discussion about how this was sort of about making it more accessible and like allowing people to make a career and a living out of it. Now all of a sudden it's like extremely bureaucratic to get into the Super League, which is quite ironic, really. It's an application process for all intents and purposes, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like a grading process essentially. So you have to meet certain criteria, and should you meet the criteria and someone else be deemed not worthy, it's basically similar to the old re-election process, except a bit more formalised, that used to happen in the football league back in the day, where the team who'd finished bottom of the football league would apply for re-election and the league would go, no. And then teams near the top of the non-league system would be apply for election and they'd go, you're the best place team. And basically what it comes to.
Yeah.
Basically they're graded A, B or C. Clubs graded A are eligible for the Super League and will be immune from relegation from the Super League. Clubs being graded B could potentially be relegated, but could also be promoted. Clubs graded C would be the rest of the clubs sort of lower down the system in the Championship and League One. The aim being to have 12 teams in the Super League all graded A, but obviously the practicality of that means it hasn't quite happened. But
no, there are some successes to that, like you were saying about Wakefield earlier, Hull KR, who we'll come to shortly. They're clubs that were not necessarily traditionally thriving in the original Super League, but who have, or were, and then had difficulties and then came back. So it's not a completely rubbish system because it sort of incentivizes sustainability.
Yeah, and I mean, what happened last season was Wakefield got relegated, had a season in the Championship, have made a lot of improvements recently as a club with some investment coming in, got themselves a top rating and got themselves back up, having won the Championship anyway. This season, I think there's going to be 3 teams going up this season because I think they're expanding. Or is that going to be for next season? I think it's this season. And Salford Red Devils are just going down. Their relegation's already been confirmed. So yeah, see how things work out. But
it's very interesting though, because you don't know when your time is up necessarily. I mean, I'm sure the writing becomes on the wall. It becomes apparent that you're coming up short on the criteria, but it's not a sporting relegation or promotion. That's the thing I find slightly peculiar about it.
Yeah, it has been in the past, but it leads to sort of unsustainability in a sense that if a team is on the brink but is otherwise doing okay, just financially is a bit tight and they end up getting relegated, it can be the last straw which pushes them over the edge, which obviously they want to avoid. But
yeah,
equally, this system then encourages a level of long-term sustainability by a grading system, which I guess is a good thing. But hopefully, the end goal of this is you end up with a lot of teams graded A or B who could sustainably be in the Super League, and therefore you can possibly go back to a promotion relegation thing with a bit more long-term sustainability as a result. Yeah. I assume it's the plan, but we'll see how it turns out.
Well, yeah, exactly. We'll see how it plays out.
It's early days.
I mean, yeah, it's complicated. It's a bit peculiar, but there's obviously method to the madness because the Super League is still around. And its regular season runs from February to September. 27 games, 11 home, 11 away. And then the additional fixtures are basically made up by what they call loop fixtures, which are decided on the previous season's league standings. Now, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Jack, because I'm not actually 100% sure about this, that means if you finish first, you would play additional games against 3rd, 5th, 7th, 9th, 11th.
I'm sure I've read that somewhere before. I also have not looked into this.
I think that's right. And then you have the Magic Weekend, which is included in the loop fixtures, where you would have, in that scenario, because they want all the games to be, Magic Weekend is like a big weekend which is showcasing the league and everyone plays on the same day at the same stadium. They want all those games to be, relatively speaking, competitive. So you would have first versus third, second versus fourth, so on and so on.
So they used to be, at the Magic Weekend, certainly when I went a couple of times, rivalry games they put together there.
Yes, that's true.
So you'd have Wakefield versus Castleford and Hull versus Hull KR and stuff like that.
Yes.
St Helens versus Wiggins, so big rivalry
games. They may well
still
do that, actually. I don't know.
But yeah,
I guess
so over 2 days, over a weekend. So Saturday, Sunday, they play 3 games on each. Or it used to be 4 and 3 when it was 14 teams in the league, as it's going to be again.
And it's a bit of a road show. They've played at like St James's Park. They played at Cardiff Millennium Stadium, or Principality, whatever you want to call it. They've played it down in London. I don't think they do it at Old Trafford for reasons that we will come to.
Yeah, I've seen it at Cardiff before.
Yeah, same. It's a road show. It's a good day out. It's a good weekend. And it's just rugby league game after rugby league game after rugby league game. Once you've done that, when it's all said and done, and you have your league standings after these 27 fixtures, you have the playoffs. And the playoffs mirrors it'll be familiar to our Aussie rules friends. Very, very similar system. Top 6 go into...
A bit simpler nowadays.
Yeah, a little bit simpler just because there's less teams in it, I think. But top 6 enter the playoffs, leading to the Super League Grand Final, which determines the champion. And the playoffs work as such. Round 1 sees 3rd play 6th and 4th play 5th. This year, that was Lee Leopards. They beat Wakefield Trinity 26-10.
Heartbreaking.
And then St Helens played Leeds Rhinos, and St Helens won 16-14. Did you see this?
It was incredible. I keep mentioning my friend Matthew. He's the most. He loves all sports, but he really, when he loves a sport, he really, really loves it. He's the one who got me into sport in the Jets, and massive St Helens fan. And I just got a series of very excitable text messages from him when that was happening. I didn't see it live, but I've watched it many times since. His incredible finish to the game, which you will explain.
Well, I mean, I can do it pretty simply because it doesn't really need much of an elaboration because
the rule explanation,
the circumstances speak for themselves, really. So in rugby, like rugby union, the clock stops when the ball is not in play, and so when you get to 80 minutes, that is the end of the game. There is no injury time, there is no extra time or what have you. However, the one subtle difference between rugby union and rugby league is that rugby union plays until the end of the next phase, and that's normally an infraction. So like someone knocks the ball on, drops it, the ball gets kicked out of play, there's a penalty or something like that. Well, depending on who wins the penalty, that brings the game to an end, essentially.
They would have to choose to kick it out from the penalty, but yes.
Yeah, well no.
Tap it and then kick it. It's complicated, but anyway.
Yeah, if you're the attacking team, you're allowed to kick it out and keep the ball going in union, but if it's from a penalty, that is. But if you're the defensive team, you'd tap it and just boot the ball off the pitch, and that would be the end of the game. In rugby league, that is not the case. So in rugby league, it is the next tackle ends the game. So you don't get to play till the end of your set of 6. You just play. So as soon as the hooter goes, that's it. Next time the ball goes dead in any way, whether it's a tackle, whether it's a drop ball, whatever, it doesn't matter. The game ends. Anyway, cue the circumstances. I think they're 14-10 to Leeds as the hooter goes, and St Helens.
I think it was 12-10 because I don't think they bothered with the conversion or didn't get the conversion. But anyway, yeah, carry on.
So it must have been 14-12 then.
14-12.
Yeah, 14-12 to Leeds. Hooter goes, and St Helens trying to keep the ball alive, and it's frantic, and a few people are sort of half scragged, and they keep the ball alive. They throw the ball. Anyway, it all culminates in a guy throwing the ball out the back, like in a sort of a reverse pass under his arm, about
a trick pass,
yeah,
basically.
about 15 metres to create a huge overlap for St Helens to score in the corner after stringing together 16 passes and evading every single tackle that came their way to score with the last play of the game. It was wild.
For any NFL fans, very similar situation to the end of an NFL game where you have to keep the ball alive and you just keep lateraling it to each other.
Yes.
Basically, if you get tackled, the game's over. It happens every so often. It is so fun when it does, whether it works out or not, but when it works out, especially when it's your team, as Matthew will attest to, it's incredible.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they did lose yesterday, so they will not be playing in the grand final.
Well, exactly. I was just coming to that. Then the winners progressed, so naturally speaking, that was Lee Leopards and St Helens. Lee Leopards went up against Wigan Warriors and lost 18-6, and St Helens went up against the league winners, who got the League Leaders Shield, Hull KR, and were beaten 20-12. So that means that your two winners of the semi-finals, and therefore your two teams in the grand final this year, are Hull KR and Wigan Warriors, and they will be playing at Old Trafford, the big dance as it's known, this weekend. Do you know how much the winners get for this?
I don't, actually.
It's not very much.
Probably not as... Yeah, I was going to say probably not that much.
£100,000 for the club that wins, and 50 for the club that comes second, which I think is shockingly low.
Yeah,
I mean, but that's, I guess, indicative of its popularity and investment in many ways.
I mean, a lot of the time we end up comparing sports to football,
to
soccer, and it's not comparable.
Yes.
It's a big sport, very popular sport in a certain part of the world, but it's not the same.
It's not the same.
Not money wise.
No, and does that feed into why it's such a monopoly for 3 clubs predominantly?
It certainly has been in the Super League history.
Yeah.
Wigan, St Helens and Leeds, I assume you're talking about.
Yeah, so basically there's only ever 4 winners, and you've named 3 of them.
Bradford Bulls. That
is it. So St Helens have got 9. They also have the most finals, 14. Leeds have got 8, third most finals though with 11. Wigan have 7, second most finals with 13. And Bradford Bulls have 3 titles with the fourth most finals, 6. There are only 7 other teams that have made a grand final. Can you name them?
Hull KR.
They are in their second.
Huddersfield.
No.
Are they actually?
Yeah.
No, that's a bloody awful start then. Hull.
Yes, 1.
Put me on the spot. Warrington.
Warrington have made 4. Yes.
Yeah.
Never won one.
Perennial losers.
Yeah. Two.
Definitely not Wakefield.
No, two you've already mentioned in different contexts.
Oh, Catalans, and they get to a final.
Catalan have made 2 finals, and they were not the 2 that you've already mentioned. This is a fun game.
Castleford?
Castleford have made 1, but you have not mentioned them before either. The 2 that you have mentioned remain on the board.
I don't know.
Salford City, Red Devils.
Salford, yes.
And London Broncos.
Of course, yeah. I forgot the Broncos did.
So Warrington, Catalan, Castleford, Hull KR, Hull FC, London Broncos and Salford City Red Devils are the only other teams to have made the grand final. They obviously all lost, which shows the dominance of the 3 leading teams in this sport, really.
It's crazy, really, when you think about it.
Yeah.
It just becomes a one-off game, obviously. But
got a bit of the Bayern Munich's about it. Even if you're good, you'll end up at one of these 3 clubs. If Wakefield all of a sudden had a generation of talents, everyone would still eventually migrate towards the 3 big clubs.
Yeah, I guess so. We end up with them having sort of periods of real domination as well. Obviously, the Leeds team, incredible Leeds team back in the day.
St Helens contested 6 finals in a row between 2006 and 2011, but they only won once against Hull FC.
Yes.
And then they suffered consecutive defeats to Leeds in 2007, 2008, 2009, which is that Rob Burrow era that you're talking about. Wigan in 2010, and then Leeds again in 2011.
Which were incidentally the first 6 years I knew Matthew, my friend. So I'm very aware of this.
Yeah, brutal. That is brutal. What was I going to say? What I was going to say was that whilst there's been a lot of domination in the playoffs and the grand final, there has been a more eclectic mix of league winners, and that means that the league winner has only actually won the grand final 11 times, which is
that is interesting.
That's an interesting stat, isn't it? But the grand final winner has only come outside of the top 2 on 4 occasions. Do you know when they might have been? I mean, that's an unfair question. You're not going to know this, I don't think.
No, I'm not going to know that. But was St Helens won once?
No. They were beaten in 2011 by Leeds in one of the occasions. So Leeds beat St Helens. Neither were in the top 2, which had been Warrington and Wigan. That's the only time that neither of the top 2 have been in the final, actually, 2011. The other occasions were in 2005, Bradford beat Leeds, who had finished 2nd, despite St Helens topping the league. 2012 was another example where Leeds beat Warrington, who finished 2nd, with Wigan losing out, having finished top.
Yeah.
And then most recently is 2013, where Wigan got their own back, beating Warrington, but Huddersfield finished top.
I think I was at that grand final.
Oh, nice.
Was it like 14-12, that one? Or was it a later one I was at?
I haven't got the score in front of me. Only the fact that it happened.
I've definitely seen Wigan win a grand final. Again, Matthew will be able to tell me when it was. I forget. Not important.
Do you have a view on the greatest grand finals that have ever been? Because I've got 2 of them that I would like to tell you about briefly.
You go ahead.
I reckon you can guess.
There may be overlaps, but you go ahead.
Okay, so where to start? Where do we start? Do you want to go old school first, or do you want to go...
Yeah, go old school. Go chronological. You know I like it.
Yeah, so 2002 is probably the best final, and also a very dramatic ending. So St Helens played Bradford Bulls. The Bulls were leading 8-0 early in the first half, but St Helens led 12-8 by the half. Early in the second half, the Bulls went ahead again 18-12, but St Helens tied the score at 18-18. So it's an absolute ding-dong, just trading leads, basically. After 2 drop goal misses from each side to win the game, St Helens' Sean Long then scored a last-minute drop goal to give them a 19-18 triumph in one of the most dramatic finishes and best grand finals ever played.
Yeah. Should point out to those who don't know that the only time really you ever try a drop goal
is to win the game.
Is to win the game when the scores are tied. You could view a 6 points up to go 7 points up to put a game beyond reach, but because it's only worth 1 point, that's all it really becomes, a sort of tie-breaking point. It's not a good tactic in any situation to ever try a drop goal unless that is the situation.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry.
No. I was going to say the only other thing to add about that final is it was the smallest margin of victory in a grand final, which is, as you have said, 1 point, because a drop goal is only worth 1 point. So that is probably the best final ever played and one of the most dramatic finishes ever played. But for drama, pure, unadulterated drama, it's probably 2020, which is a shame because the 2020 final was played, I think, either behind closed doors or before a very small crowd, because the return of the football season after COVID meant that it wasn't even played at Old Trafford. It was played in Hull.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
And it was probably one of the worst finals of all time with the greatest finish of all time.
For 79 minutes, yeah.
So, St Helens versus Wigan. And I should probably say Matthew would have been freaking the fuck out about this.
Especially against Wigan, yeah.
Scores 4-4 in the 78th minute. This is incredible. This is actually incredible. 78th minute, 2 minutes to go. Bearing in mind, as we said, the game ends at 80. It is dead. As soon as the ball goes dead in 80, it's dead. So 78th minute, Wigan are awarded a penalty when St Helens player was ruled to be offside from just inside the Saints half. So it's a big kick. Wigan's Zach Hardacre took a shot at goal, and his kick drifted just to the right of the goalpost, leaving the scores remaining tied. As the game went into the final seconds, Saints winger Tommy Makinson attempts a drop goal, and as the hooter sounded and the end of the game and was effectively declared, but for obviously the ball falling dead, the ball hits the post, bounced back in play, and then bounced back towards the Wigan in goal area, where St Helens centre Jack Wellsbury has out-sprinted the Wigan fullback Bevan French and literally dived and got his hand just to the ball before it goes into the dead ball area, touches it down and scores the winning try. Game ends 8-4. Like, insane.
Scenes. Sounds about right.
Scenes is about right. It was pretty wild. Yeah, so it's actually not a game that lends itself to that much drama in grand finals, and I don't want to pour cold water on it before we end the episode, but there haven't been that many dramatic finals. They're often quite one-sided for the reasons that we've said about the dominance of various teams.
Yeah.
Biggest margin for victory was Bradford when they beat Wigan 37-6 in 2001, 31 points, an absolute battering. Highest scoring game was Leeds St Helens 2011, 48 points, but it was 32-16 to Leeds. The lowest scoring game was actually last year's grand final, which is a real dud, which was Wigan winning 9-2 against Hull KR, only 11 points in the whole game.
That's crazy, yeah.
And obviously
didn't watch that.
Hull KR have a shot of vengeance this year because it's exactly the same final. Hull KR winning the league, Wigan finishing second in the league, both of them progressing through to the final. But yeah,
I'll be supporting KR.
Oh, I will be supporting KR as well. Like, be the first time winners if they manage to pull it off. So there's a romance still, a narrative that can be written.
Indeed, and you know we love a narrative.
We love a narrative.
We love an underdog. We love romance.
We love an underdog. But yeah, that's your grand final, really. Like, there's not really much else to say. It's yeah. I mean, other than just paying homage with the final word, I guess, to say that the Man of the Match award in the Super League grand final is now named the Rob Burrow Award after the late great Rob Burrow.
Yeah, and rightly so. Yeah. I didn't actually know that. That's made me very happy.
Yeah, it's nice.
I probably should have known that, but yeah.
Yeah, so
lovely.
Where can you watch it? I think it's
Sky Sports, obviously.
Yeah, Sky. Yeah,
Rupert Murdoch.
It's not on. The Challenge Cup is on free to air, but the grand final is not. So you will need to have Sky Sports if you want to watch the grand final.
Yes.
Should we leave it there? Rugby League for the time being.
I think so. I think we'll have. We'll obviously, as we keep saying, we'll always more opportunity to talk about sport in the future. But
the good thing about our model is that it just follows the calendar.
It does. Weird that.
If people haven't picked up on that.
And we're going to get to the stage now where, obviously, every time we do an episode for the first time, it tends to be, this is the history. So we're going to get on to episode 2 of something, and we can then delve into sort of more specific bits of the history, or just be a bit more contemporary about it.
Yeah.
Or just wax lyrical, exactly. Which, it's good. I'm looking forward to it.
It will be fun.
A new season. New season's coming along not too long, really. Or new year, at least.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So you're off on your hollybobs now.
Yes.
I keep calling them hollybobs, which is a sickening phrase. I don't know why I keep using it. You're going on your holiday, your well-earned holiday, and you're going to be away for 2 weeks. We have one pre-recorded episode.
We do. Unfortunately, I don't think we're going to have time to get the second one in. But the second one was due to be on the NBA. Yeah. And the good thing about the NBA is not that much happens during the regular season anyway. So we'll fill in that gap.
Yes.
Similar to what we did with volleyball previously when I was ill and we missed a week. We'll fill in that gap at some point. But for now, there'll be an archery episode next week. And then you can all have a week off our voices as I'm on holiday.
There's an episode coming out on the 14th, basically, but not on the 21st. And then we'll be back on the 28th, hopefully.
Yeah. I'll be back by then.
Perfect.
All being well.
Yeah, as long as you don't get arrested in your hotel lobby and miss your flight and have to go before a local judge. Who that's never happened to anybody in the senior family before, has it, Samuel?
That's such a random pull. Yeah, can confirm that may or may not have happened to my brother at one point. He was completely exonerated, it should be pointed out.
Yeah, because he didn't do anything wrong.
He did nothing wrong. He just existed.
Fucking idiot. Like, making a complaint against him. Oh, I don't know. Sam would tell that story better. I will not try. It's just ridiculous. A very American story.
He'll be enjoying the fact that just got pulled up in the rugby league episode.
Yeah, how do we get... Oh, yeah, because you are going to America.
I am, yes.
Well, have a lovely time.
I'll try not to get eaten by an alligator. That was my main concern, but yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and I will see you... Well, I will probably speak to you whilst you're in America, but I will see you for the purposes of this in a couple of weeks.
Yes, although you as the listening public will hear us next week in our magically pre-recorded episode.
Yeah.
On archery.
Well,
cool.
That leaves us to say...
Bon voyage.
Goodbye.
To me.
Safe travels.
Thank you.
See you soon.
See you soon. Thank you for listening today. You're the best person I know and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. If you enjoyed it, the usual like, subscribe or rating would go down nicely. And as always, please tell your friends about us. All of them. Without exception. Our theme tune is Oh Yeah by Harmonia Productions. You can find us on Instagram and Blue Sky at The Sporting Almanac. Drop us an email at thesportingalmanacpodcast@gmail.com. Next up, it's archery. Or at least our best attempt at it. Until then, whatever code is your first love, as long as you love big hits, and remember that sport is nothing without the history that makes it, that's okay. Have a good week. Goodbye.